I didn't pay for my daughter-in-law's luxury party, so she slapped me so hard I lost my balance. Pack your bags and get out of my house. My son nodded. I'll drain every cent from your account. I smiled. I had been expecting this. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Della, and at 63 years old, I never imagined my own son would stand by while his wife slapped me across the face. But there I was, standing in what used to be my living room, my cheek stinging from Yara's perfectly manicured hand. "You selfish old woman!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls I had painted myself just 2 years ago. $50,000 is nothing to you. You're just being spiteful. I touched my face gently, feeling the heat radiating from where her palm had connected. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at my son Abram, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife that hitting a 63-year-old woman was unacceptable. Instead, he crossed his arms and nodded in agreement. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," he said, his voice cold as winter morning. "It's Yara's birthday party. She deserves something special." Something special. $50,000 for a birthday party. For a woman who had never worked a day in her life, who spent her mornings at the spa and her afternoons shopping with my money. My money that I had earned working double shifts as a nurse for 30 years, saving every penny I could. I said no, I repeated calmly, though my heart was pounding. $50,000 for one party is excessive. Yara's face turned red, her eyes blazing with fury. She stepped closer to me, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the scent of her anger. "Make your bags and get out of my house," she shrieked, pointing toward the stairs. My house, the house I had bought and paid for, the house where I had raised Abram after his father died. The house where I had sacrificed everything to give my son a good life. I turned to Abram again, hoping to see some flicker of the boy I had raised, the son who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mom in the world. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a 35-year-old man who looked at me like I was a burden. "You heard her," he said, his voice steady and determined. "Pack your things. And Mom?" He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "I'm going to take every cent from your account. You've been living off me long enough. Living off him." The irony was so sharp it could cut glass. For the past 5 years, since he married Yara, I had been paying their mortgage, their car payments, their credit card bills. I had been the one supporting them while Abram bounced from one failed business venture to another, and Yara spent her days planning elaborate parties and shopping trips. But instead of crying or pleading, I smiled, a real, genuine smile that seemed to confuse them both. "I've been waiting for this day," I said quietly. Yara frowned, her anger momentarily replaced by confusion. "What do you mean?" I straightened my shoulders, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. "I mean, I knew this moment would come. I've been preparing for it." Abram stepped forward, his face twisted with irritation. "What are you talking about?" I looked around the room one more time, taking in the furniture I had bought, the photographs of Abram's childhood that lined the mantelpiece, the life I had built in this house. Then I looked back at my son and his wife. "You'll find out soon enough," I said, heading toward the stairs. "I'll be out by tomorrow morning." As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I could hear them whispering frantically below. Yara's voice was sharp with worry, Abram's deep with concern. They were probably wondering what I meant, what I could possibly have planned. If only they knew. I had been watching them for months, seeing the way they looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention, the way Yara rolled her eyes when I spoke, the way Abram sighed whenever I entered a room. I had overheard their conversations about putting me in a nursing home, about how much easier their lives would be without me around. Most importantly, I had heard them discussing my will, assuming they would inherit everything when I died. They had made their plans based on my money, my house, my life's work. They had counted on my death to solve their financial problems. But I wasn't dead, and I wasn't the helpless old woman they thought I was. I pulled my suitcases from the closet, the same ones I had used for my honeymoon 40 years ago. My hands were steady as I began folding my clothes, each piece carefully placed. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't panicking. For the first time in 5 years, I felt completely calm. The bedroom door creaked open, and Abram appeared in the doorway. His face was softer now, almost apologetic. "Mom, look," he began, his voice gentle. "Maybe we can work something out. Yara's just stressed about the party. She didn't mean to hit you." I continued packing, not bothering to look at him. "Yes, she did." He was quiet for a moment. "The thing about your account, I was just angry. We don't have to go that far." Now I did look at him, studying his face. He was handsome, my son. He looked like his father, with the same dark hair and brown eyes. But there was something different in his expression now, something calculating. "You're worried," I observed. "I'm not worried," he said quickly. "I just don't want things to end like this between us." I zipped up the first suitcase and reached for the second one. "Things ended between us a long time ago, Abram. You just didn't notice." The truth was, I had been planning this moment for 6 months. Ever since I overheard Yara on the phone with her mother, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the old bat into paying for everything. Ever since I found the brochures for expensive nursing homes hidden in Abram's office, with notes about the costs and waiting lists. They thought I was a fool. They thought I was weak, dependent, trapped. Tomorrow they would learn just how wrong they were. The morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains as I folded the last of my clothes. Each piece told a story of the life I had built, the sacrifices I had made. My nursing uniforms, worn thin from years of service. The simple dresses I wore to Abram's school events, always rushing straight from work. The black dress I had bought for Robert's funeral, when my world collapsed and I became a single mother overnight. I was 28 when Robert died. A heart attack at 32, leaving me with a 5-year-old son and a mountain of medical debt that his insurance barely covered. I remember sitting in this very room, holding Abram while he cried for his daddy, wondering how I was going to survive. But I did survive. More than that, I thrived. I worked double shifts at the hospital, picked up extra weekend hours, took on private nursing cases when I could. I wanted to give Abram everything his father would have provided if he had lived. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw my son graduate high school, when he got accepted to college, when he walked across that stage to receive his diploma. I had been so proud, so foolishly, blindly proud. Now, as I placed my jewelry box in the suitcase, I remembered the conversation that had opened my eyes. It was 3 months ago, late on a Tuesday evening. I had come home early from a doctor's appointment and heard voices from the kitchen. Yara was on the phone, and Abram was making coffee. "The old woman is getting suspicious about the bills," Yara was saying, twirling a strand of her perfectly highlighted hair. "She actually asked me why the grocery bill was $800 last month." Abram chuckled. "Just tell her you're buying organic. She'll buy anything if you say it's for her health." "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Yara continued. "She's not as stupid as she looks. Yesterday she asked to see the mortgage statements." My blood had run cold. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to my son and daughter-in-law discuss me like I was a mark in some elaborate con game. "We just need to be patient," Abram said. "The nursing home I looked at has an opening in 6 months. Sunset Manor. It's expensive, but once she's there, we can handle her finances completely. Power of attorney, the works. And if she refuses to go? We'll get a doctor to say she's showing signs of dementia. Dr. Peterson owes me a favor from college. It won't be hard." I had backed away slowly, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they would hear it. That night, lying in bed, I made my decision. If they wanted to play games with my life and my money, I would play too, but I would play to win. The next morning, I started making calls, first to a lawyer downtown, one I had found through a colleague at the hospital, then to a real estate agent I had met at church. The plan I developed over the following weeks was simple but effective. They thought I was weak because I was old. They thought I was helpless because I lived in their house, paid their bills, made their lives comfortable. What they didn't realize was that comfort had made them lazy, complacent. They had stopped paying attention to the details, like the fact that the house was still in my name only. When Robert died, I had refused to put it in joint ownership with anyone. It was my security, my safety net. Abram had tried to convince me to add his name to the deed several times over the years, but I had always declined, claiming it was too complicated. They thought I was being sentimental. In reality, I was being smart. Over the past 6 months, I had quietly sold the house to a property investment company. The sale wouldn't close for another month, but the contracts were signed. The money was already in an account they couldn't access. When they tried to put me in that nursing home, they would discover they had no home to inherit, no mortgage to worry about, no equity to cash out. The irony was delicious. I had also transferred all my savings to a new bank across town, one where Abram had never been listed as a co-signer. Every penny I had saved over 30 years of nursing was now safely out of their reach. The account they thought they could drain contained exactly $12.37, just enough to buy a cup of coffee and a newspaper. The jewelry box in my hands contained the only valuables I was taking with me. My wedding ring from Robert, a simple gold band that had cost him 2 months' salary. The pearl earrings my mother had given me before she died. A silver locket with Abram's baby picture inside, from back when he loved me unconditionally. I lifted the locket, opening it to look at the tiny photograph. He had been such a beautiful baby, with chubby cheeks and bright eyes full of wonder. I used to rock him to sleep every night, singing lullabies my own mother had sung to me. He would wrap his little fingers around mine and look up at me like I was the most important person in the world. When had that changed? When had I become the enemy instead of the woman who had given him everything? I think it started when Yara entered his life. She was beautiful, charming, sophisticated in a way I had never been. She came from money, knew how to dress, how to speak, how to make people notice her. And she made it clear from the beginning that I was an embarrassment, a reminder of Abram's humble origins. At first, Abram defended me. He would tell Yara to be nice, remind her that I had sacrificed everything for him. But gradually, her influence grew stronger. She complained about my cooking, my clothes, my presence at family gatherings. She made jokes about my old-fashioned ways, rolled her eyes when I shared stories about Abram's childhood, and slowly, Abram began to see me through her eyes. The devoted mother became the interfering old woman. The woman who had worked herself to exhaustion became the burden who lived off their generosity. I closed the locket and placed it carefully in the jewelry box. Tomorrow morning, I would walk out of this house for the last time. I would leave behind 35 years of memories, decades of love and sacrifice, but I wouldn't leave empty-handed. I would leave with my dignity intact, my independence restored, and my future in my own hands. For the first time in 5 years, I would be free. The morning I left was gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matches your mood when everything in your life is changing. I loaded my 2 suitcases into my old Honda Civic, the same car I had been driving for 8 years while paying for Abram and Yara's luxury vehicles. Neither of them came downstairs to say goodbye. I could see Yara peeking through the bedroom curtains, probably making sure I was actually leaving. I took one last look at the house that had been my home for 35 years. The garden I had planted, the porch I had painted every few summers, the mailbox with our family name that I had installed when Abram was 12. It was hard to believe I was walking away from all of it, but the weight on my chest was lifting with every step I took toward my car. The drive across town took 20 minutes, through neighborhoods that gradually became smaller, more modest. I wasn't moving to the wealthy side of town where I had lived for decades. Instead, I was heading to Maple Street, a quiet area with small apartment buildings and houses where working people lived. Real people who understood the value of a dollar earned through honest work. The apartment I had rented was on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian house. Mrs. Chen, my new landlady, met me at the front door with a warm smile and a cup of tea. She was 72, a widow who had converted her large family home into apartments after her husband passed away. "Welcome to your new home, dear," she said, helping me carry one of my suitcases up the narrow stairs. "I think you're going to be very happy here." The apartment was small but bright, with hardwood floors and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. It had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living area that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the garden behind the house. After living in a 4-bedroom house for so many years, It felt almost impossibly compact, but it also felt peaceful in a way I had forgotten was possible. Mrs. Chen showed me around, pointing out the quirks of the old building. The bedroom window that stuck sometimes, the kitchen faucet that needed to be turned just right, the radiator that made gentle humming sounds on cold nights. These weren't problems to me, they were character. This place had soul, unlike the pristine house I had just left behind. "The rent is due on the 1st of each month," she said, handing me a cup of tea in her small kitchen downstairs. "But don't worry about it this time, dear. You paid 3 months in advance." She was right. I had paid for the apartment 6 months ago, along with deposits for utilities and a small storage unit across town. I had been planning this move longer than even I realized, preparing for the day when staying would become impossible. After Mrs. Chen left me to settle in, I sat on the small couch I had bought secondhand and looked around my new space. It was quiet in a way that felt foreign after years of Yara's constant complaining and Abram's loud phone calls about business deals that never materialized. The silence was golden. I was unpacking my clothes when my cell phone rang. Abram's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. "Mom?" His voice sounded strained, worried. "Where are you?" "I'm in my new apartment," I said calmly, hanging a dress in the small closet. "New apartment?" "Mom, you don't need to do this. Come home. We can work things out." I almost laughed. "That's not my home anymore, Abram. You made that very clear yesterday." Yara was upset. She didn't mean what she said about the house. Yes, she did, and so did you. I sat down on the bed, looking out the window at the maple tree that gave the street its name. "But that's fine. I've been preparing for this." There was a long pause. "What do you mean, preparing?" "I mean, I sold the house, Abram." The silence that followed was so complete I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "You what?" "I sold the house 6 months ago. The sale closes in 3 weeks. I thought you should know so you can start looking for somewhere else to live." The explosion of anger that came through the phone was so loud I had to hold it away from my ear. Yara was screaming in the background, and Abram was shouting questions I couldn't quite make out. When the noise finally died down, he spoke again. "You can't do this. The house is our home. We've invested money in renovations." "With my money," I reminded him. "And the house was never in your name. It was mine to sell." "But where are we supposed to go? We can't afford rent somewhere else." The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had threatened to drain my bank account was now worried about paying his own way in the world. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're both adults. You've been telling me I need to act my age and stop relying on family. I thought you'd appreciate me taking your advice. This is insane. You're being vindictive and cruel. I'm being practical. You wanted me out of your life. Now you have what you wanted." I hung up before he could respond. The phone rang immediately, but I turned it off. I wasn't ready for round 2 of that conversation. That evening, as I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Real, deep, uninterrupted peace. There were no arguments downstairs, no tension hanging in the air like smoke. No one was discussing my money or my future without including me in the conversation. For the first time in 5 years, I was living in my own space, making my own decisions, answering to no one but myself. The next morning, I walked to the small cafe 3 blocks away and bought myself breakfast. Real breakfast, not the expensive organic nonsense Yara insisted on. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and coffee that cost $3 instead of $8. I sat by the window and watched ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, and it felt extraordinary to be one of them again. When I got back to the apartment, there was a message on my answering machine. It was from a lawyer I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Morrison, this is David Klein from Klein & Associates. Your son has hired me to look into reversing the sale of your house. Please call me at your earliest convenience." I smiled as I deleted the message. Let him hire all the lawyers he wanted. The sale was legal, binding, and completely within my rights as the sole owner of the property. There was nothing to reverse, nothing to challenge, but there was one more surprise waiting for them, one I hadn't mentioned during our phone call. The house sale had left me with a significant profit, money I had immediately invested in a trust fund that would provide me with monthly income for the rest of my life. The trustee was a bank in another state, and the terms I had set were very specific. If anyone tried to claim I was mentally incompetent or unable to make my own decisions, the trust would be investigated by an independent board of doctors and lawyers. If they found me competent, which they would, any family member who had challenged my mental state would be permanently excluded from any inheritance. Abram and Yara thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who could be easily manipulated or discarded. They were about to learn that the woman who had raised a child alone, worked her way through nursing school, and built a life from nothing was far from helpless. Their real education was just beginning. It was Mrs. Patterson from next door who called to tell me about the scene at the house. I had known Eleanor Patterson for 20 years, and she had never been one for gossip, which made her phone call all the more significant. "Della, dear," she said, her voice tight with concern, "I thought you should know what's happening over there. That boy of yours and his wife have been shouting at each other for 3 days straight. Yesterday, I saw them loading boxes into their cars. Are they moving?" I was sitting in my new kitchen, having just finished a simple lunch of soup and crackers. Through my window, I could see Mrs. Chen tending to her garden, humming softly to herself. The contrast between this peaceful scene and what Eleanor was describing felt surreal. "I believe they are," I said calmly. "The house sold, so they'll need to find somewhere else to live." There was a pause. "Oh my, and where will you go?" "I've already moved, Eleanor. I have a lovely little apartment across town." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, good for you, dear. That girl was never very nice to you. I used to hear her shouting sometimes when I was working in my garden." After I hung up, I sat quietly for a few minutes, processing this information. Part of me felt a twinge of something that might have been guilt, but it was quickly overwhelmed by a sense of justice. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. The next call came from Yara herself. I had changed my phone number, but apparently she had gotten it from someone at the hospital where I used to work. Her voice was different now, lacking the confident arrogance I had grown used to over the years. "Della, we need to talk," she said, trying to sound reasonable. "This whole situation has gotten out of hand." "I don't think we have anything to discuss," I replied, continuing to fold the laundry I had just brought up from the basement. "Look, I know I was harsh the other day. I was stressed about the party, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry." The apology sounded rehearsed, like something she had practiced in front of a mirror, but there was something else in her voice, something I had never heard before. Fear. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but it doesn't change anything." "It has to change something." The facade cracked, and her real desperation came through. "We can't just lose everything because of one stupid fight." "You didn't lose everything because of one fight, Yara. You lost everything because of 5 years of taking me for granted. That's not fair. We took care of you." I laughed, a sound that surprised even me with its bitterness. "You took care of me? I paid your mortgage, your car payments, your credit cards. I bought your groceries, paid your insurance, covered your medical bills. Exactly what did you take care of?" She was quiet for a moment. "We gave you a place to live." "In my own house. We let you be part of our family by treating me like hired help." The conversation went in circles for another 10 minutes, with Yara alternately pleading, threatening, and trying to bargain. She offered to give me a bigger room in whatever house they moved to. She promised Abram would be nicer to me. She even suggested we could all go to family counseling together. What she never offered was a genuine apology or any acknowledgement of how they had really treated me. Even in her desperation, she couldn't see me as anything more than a problem to be solved. I hung up when she started crying, not because I felt sorry for her, but because the tears felt as false as everything else about her. 3 days later, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Dolores Martinez, another neighbor from my old street. She rushed over to me with the eager energy of someone bursting to share dramatic news. "Della, I heard about what happened. The whole neighborhood is talking about it." I selected a box of tea from the shelf, trying to look casual. "Oh, what are they saying?" "Well, The Hendersons saw moving trucks at your house yesterday. And Susan Walsh said she heard Yara crying on the phone to someone about having to move into a one-bedroom apartment in the Riverside district. Riverside. I knew that area. It was where young couples lived when they were just starting out, in small apartments with thin walls and no amenities. It was a far cry from the 4-bedroom house with the large yard and 2-car garage that I had provided for them. And, Dolores continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, Jim Morrison from the hardware store said Abram came in asking about jobs. Apparently he's looking for work. This was interesting. Abram hadn't held a steady job in 3 years, always claiming he was working on business deals or investment opportunities that never materialized. I had been supporting all of his ventures, funding his failures with my nursing income and savings. That's good for him, I said diplomatically. Everyone should contribute to society. Oh, absolutely, Dolores agreed quickly. It's just surprising, you know. He always seemed to think he was above regular work. That evening, I called Margaret Foster, my oldest friend from the hospital. We had worked together for 15 years before she retired, and she had always been one of the few people who saw through Yara's act. I heard about your situation, she said without preamble when she answered the phone. Good for you, Della. It was about time. You think I did the right thing? Honey, you should have done it years ago. That girl was bleeding you dry and your son was letting her do it. Margaret had never been one to sugarcoat her opinions, which was one of the reasons I valued her friendship so much. I ran into Carol Jenkins at the pharmacy today, she continued. She said Yara came in looking for a job application. Can you imagine? That girl who thought she was too good to work is finally going to have to get her hands dirty. The idea of Yara working behind a pharmacy counter was almost comical, but I tried not to take too much satisfaction in it. Almost. Have you heard from Abram? Margaret asked. He's called a few times, left some messages I haven't returned. What does he say? I thought about the increasingly desperate voicemails. The first few had been angry, demanding that I reverse the house sale and come back. Then they had shifted to pleading, with Abram claiming he hadn't realized how much I had been contributing to their lifestyle. The most recent one, which I had listened to just that morning, was different. Mom, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I've been thinking about things, about how we treated you, and I'm starting to understand. Can we please talk? Not about the house or money, just talk. I miss you. For the first time since this all began, he had sounded like my son instead of like Yara's husband, but I wasn't ready to trust that voice yet. He says he wants to talk, I told Margaret. Claims he misses me. Do you believe him? I watched Mrs. Chen through my kitchen window, watering her tomato plants in the fading evening light. She moved slowly but purposefully, taking care of each plant individually. There was something peaceful about her routine, something honest. I think he misses my bank account, I said finally. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Maybe, but maybe not. Losing everything has a way of clarifying what really matters. As I hung up the phone, I wondered if she was right. Was it possible that Abram was finally seeing clearly? Or was this just another manipulation, a more sophisticated version of Yara's tears and empty apologies? Time would tell. But for the first time in years, I had the luxury of time. Time to think, to decide, to choose my own path forward. And that luxury felt more valuable than any house or bank account ever could. 3 months into my new life, I discovered something I had forgotten existed. Joy. Not the complicated, conditional happiness that depended on other people's moods or demands, but simple, pure joy in small moments. It started with the watercolor class at the community center. I had always wanted to paint, but there had never been time. Between working double shifts and managing Abram's needs, then later dealing with Yara's constant crises and demands, artistic pursuits seemed like luxuries I couldn't afford. Now, sitting in the bright classroom on Thursday mornings, mixing blues and greens on my palette, I felt like I was rediscovering a part of myself that had been buried for decades. You have a natural eye for color, said Helen, the instructor, looking over my shoulder at my attempt to capture the maple tree outside my apartment window. Have you painted before? Only walls, I replied, and she laughed. Helen was 68, a retired art teacher who had started these community classes because she missed working with students. She had silver hair that she wore in a loose bun and paint-stained fingers that moved with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime creating. "Well, walls are good practice for composition," she said, "but this is much more rewarding." She was right. There was something magical about watching colors blend on paper, about creating something beautiful from nothing but pigment and water. My paintings weren't masterpieces, but they were mine in a way that nothing in my life had been for years. The other students in the class became my first real friends in decades. There was Dorothy, a 72-year-old retired librarian who painted flowers with meticulous detail. Frank, a widower in his late 60s who specialized in landscapes and had a dry sense of humor that made everyone laugh. And Maria, a 55-year-old former teacher who had taken early retirement to care for her aging mother and was now rediscovering her own interests. We started meeting for coffee after class, then expanded to lunch on Tuesdays and occasional trips to art museums in the city. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like I belonged to a community of equals, people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. It was Maria who suggested the beach trip. There's this little town on the coast, Seaside Heights. It's not fancy, but it's peaceful, perfect for painting seascapes. The idea excited me more than it should have. I hadn't taken a vacation in 15 years, always claiming I couldn't afford it or couldn't leave Abram and Yara to manage on their own. Now I realized I had been the only thing stopping myself. We rented a small cottage for a long weekend in October, when the summer crowds were gone and the light had that golden quality that painters love. I stood on the beach at sunrise, watching the waves roll in, breathing salt air and feeling more alive than I had in decades. "This is what freedom looks like," Dorothy said, setting up her easel beside mine. She was right. Freedom wasn't just the absence of demands and obligations, it was the presence of choice. The ability to wake up each morning and decide what mattered to you that day. While we were away, I received another letter from Abram. I had been getting them regularly, 1 or 2 a week, but I had stopped opening most of them. This one was different, though. The envelope was addressed in his own handwriting rather than typed, and something about it made me curious enough to read it. "Dear Mom," it began, and I could almost hear his voice saying the words. "I know you probably won't read this, and I understand why. I've had 3 months to think about everything that happened, about the way we treated you, and I'm ashamed of the man I became. Yara and I separated last month. She moved back in with her parents in California. She couldn't handle our new reality, the apartment, the jobs, the life without your support. When things got hard, she blamed everyone but herself. She blamed you for being vindictive, me for not standing up to you, the world for being unfair. She never once acknowledged that we brought this on ourselves. I'm working now, Mom. Really working. I got a job at Henderson Construction, the same company where I worked summers during high school. Do you remember? You were so proud when I came home with my first paycheck, covered in sawdust and exhausted but happy. I had forgotten what that felt like, earning something through honest work. Living alone in that little apartment has given me time to remember things I had pushed aside. Like how you worked those double shifts to pay for my college. Like how you never missed a parent-teacher conference, even when you were so tired you could barely stand. Like how you always made my birthday special, even when money was tight. I remember the year I turned 12, when money was really bad after Dad died. You worked extra shifts for weeks to buy me that bicycle I wanted. I found out later that you didn't buy yourself a winter coat that year because you couldn't afford both. I never thanked you for that coat you didn't buy, Mom. I never thanked you for a lot of things. I'm not writing this to ask you to forgive me, though I hope someday you might. I'm not asking you to come back or to help us financially. I'm writing because I need you to know that I finally understand what I lost when I chose Yara's comfort over your dignity. I lost my mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for me. The woman who loved me unconditionally until I made that love impossible to give. I hope you're happy wherever you are. I hope you're painting or traveling or doing all those things you put off to take care of me. You deserve happiness, Mom. You always did. Love, Abram. I read the letter 3 times, sitting on the cottage porch while my friends painted the sunset. Each reading brought different emotions: surprise, skepticism, sadness, and something that might have been hope. Was this real? Had losing everything truly changed him? Or was this just a more sophisticated manipulation? The tone was different from his previous letters, less desperate and more reflective. But I had been fooled before. Frank found me there, an hour later, the letter still in my hands, tears on my cheeks. "Bad news from home?" he asked gently. I showed him the letter. Frank had become something of a confidant over these months, partly because he was a good listener, and partly because he had his own complicated relationship with his adult children. He read it carefully, then handed it back. "What do you think?" "I think he sounds different, but I don't know if I can trust that." Frank was quiet for a moment, watching a seagull pick at something in the sand. "You know what I learned when Margaret died? Sometimes people don't change until they lose everything that matters to them. The question is whether they learn the right lesson from the loss." "What do you mean?" "Well, some people lose everything and decide the world is unfair, that they're victims, that someone else is to blame. Others lose everything and realize they were the author of their own misfortune. The letter sounds like he might be in the second category, but only time will tell." That night, I sat on the beach alone, listening to the waves and thinking about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that meant forgetting what had happened or returning to the old patterns, but the kind that meant releasing the anger that had been eating at me for so long. I thought about Robert and what he would have wanted for our son. He had been a good man, patient and kind, and he had loved Abram fiercely in the short time they had together. Would he want me to give Abram another chance? But more importantly, what did I want? For the first time in my life, that was the only question that mattered. When I returned from the beach trip, I found myself looking forward to things in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Another letter from Abram, this time with no demands or manipulations, just updates about his job and questions about my life. Dorothy had invited me to Thanksgiving with her family. Maria and I were planning a Christmas trip to see the lights in the city. My small apartment had become a haven filled with my paintings, books I actually had time to read, and the comfortable silence of a space that truly belonged to me. But in the quiet moments, I still wondered about my son. Was he really changing? Or was this all an elaborate performance? And if he was changing, did that mean I owed him a second chance? The answer, I was beginning to realize, wasn't about what I owed anyone. It was about what I wanted to choose, freely and without obligation. For the first time in my life, the choice was entirely mine. 1 year after I walked out of that house, I was standing in front of my easel on a Saturday morning, working on a painting of the harbor at sunrise, when someone knocked on my door. Mrs. Chen was visiting her daughter in Portland, so I wasn't expecting anyone. My painting friends usually called first, and the mailman had already been by. Through the peephole, I saw Abram standing in the hallway, holding a small bouquet of flowers, not the expensive arrangements Yara used to demand, but simple daisies and baby's breath from the grocery store. He looked different than he had a year ago, thinner, but healthier somehow. His clothes were clean but modest, and his face had the kind of weathered look that comes from honest work. I opened the door but left the chain latch engaged. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly. "I know I should have called first." "Yes, you should have." My voice was calmer than I felt. "What do you want, Abram?" "I wanted to see you, to talk to you, and to give you these." He held up the flowers. "Not because I'm asking for anything, but because it's Saturday, and I used to bring you flowers on Saturdays when I was little." I remembered. He had picked dandelions from the yard, presenting them to me with such pride that I had put them in my best vase and displayed them on the kitchen table like they were roses. "I can't stay long," he continued. "I have to work this afternoon, but I hoped we could talk for a few minutes." I studied his face through the crack in the door. There was no desperation there now, no calculation. He looked like someone who had accepted disappointment and learned to live with it. I unlatched the chain and opened the door. "Come in," I said, "but I'm not making coffee. You get water or nothing." He smiled at that, a real smile that reminded me of the boy he used to be. "Water's fine." He looked around my small apartment, taking in the paintings on the walls, the books stacked on every available surface, the comfortable chaos of a life lived for one person's pleasure. "This is nice, Mom. Really nice." It feels like you. I handed him a glass of water and sat down across from him. What did you want to talk about? He was quiet for a long moment, rolling the glass between his hands. I wanted to tell you that I understand now. What we did to you, what I let happen. I wanted to apologize, really apologize, not because I want something, but because you deserve to hear it. I'm listening. When Yara left, when I was sitting alone in that apartment for the first time in my adult life, I started remembering things, real things, not the story I had told myself about how generous we were to let you live with us. He shook his head. The arrogance of that. We let you live in your own house. I didn't say anything. This was his moment to speak, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. I remembered how you used to wait up for me in high school, no matter how late I came home from work or dates. How you never missed a single one of my baseball games, even when you had worked a double shift and could barely keep your eyes open. How you cried at my college graduation because you were so proud. His voice caught slightly. And I remembered how that changed after I married Yara, how I started seeing you through her eyes, as someone who was in the way instead of someone who had given me everything. Why? I asked. Why did you let that happen? He was quiet for a long time. Because it was easier. It was easier to believe that you were the problem than to admit that I had become someone who took advantage of the person who loved him most. The honesty in his voice surprised me. This wasn't the polished apology I had expected, the kind calculated to get him what he wanted. This was raw, uncomfortable truth. Yara made it easy to justify, he continued. She was so good at making your generosity seem like interference, your presence seem like an intrusion. But the truth is, I let her do it because I was selfish. I liked the lifestyle your money provided, and I didn't want to work for it myself. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. Real shame. The kind that comes from acknowledging your own failures rather than blaming others for them. What do you want from me now? I asked. Nothing, he said, and I believed him. I mean, I want your forgiveness someday, if you can manage it. And I want the chance to show you that I'm not that person anymore. But I'm not asking you to help me financially, or to come back and take care of me, or to pretend like nothing happened. He set his glass down and looked directly at me. I want to earn the right to be your son again, if that's possible. I felt something shift in my chest, a loosening of the anger I had carried for so long. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. How? I asked. However you'll let me. Maybe we could have lunch once a month, somewhere public where you feel safe. Maybe you could tell me about your painting, and I could tell you about my job. Maybe we could start small and see if we can build something real this time. I thought about the life I had built over the past year, the friends who valued me, the hobbies that brought me joy, the peace I had found in my small apartment. None of that would change, because I chose to give my son a chance. It was all still mine, secure and independent of his presence or absence in my life. Once a month, I said finally. Lunch at Romano's on 3rd Street. We split the check. And if you ever try to manipulate me or ask me for money, it's over permanently. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Mom. I won't let you down. You already did let me down, Abram. The question is whether you've learned enough to avoid doing it again. He stood up, leaving the flowers on my coffee table. I have. I promise you, I have. After he left, I sat with his flowers for a long time, thinking about second chances and the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. The truth was, I didn't know if he had really changed or if this was just a more sophisticated version of his old manipulations, but I realized it didn't matter. I wasn't the same woman who had lived in fear of losing his love, who had sacrificed her own dignity to maintain a relationship with someone who didn't respect her. I was stronger now, more complete in myself. If he disappointed me again, I would survive it. If he proved himself worthy of trust, I would be glad to have my son back. But either way, I would be fine. That evening, I called Dorothy to tell her about Abram's visit. She listened without judgment, then said something that crystallized everything I had been feeling. You know what I love about this story, Della. You're not making this decision from a place of need anymore. You're making it from a place of strength. She was right. For the first time in my relationship with my son, I had all the power. I had my own life, my own money, my own friends, my own happiness. I didn't need him to complete me or validate me or take care of me in my old age. I was choosing to give him a chance not because I had to, but because I wanted to see if the man he was becoming was someone I could respect. 3 months later, we had our 4th lunch at Romano's. Abram told me about the promotion he had earned at the construction company, and I showed him pictures from my latest painting trip with Dorothy and Maria. We talked about books we had read, movies we had seen, the small details of our separate lives. It wasn't the relationship we used to have, built on need and obligation and unspoken resentments. It was something new, something honest, something between 2 adults who were choosing to know each other. As I walked back to my apartment that afternoon, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, standing in that living room with a stinging cheek and a broken heart. She couldn't have imagined this life, couldn't have conceived of a happiness that belonged entirely to her. The greatest gift Yara had given me, though she would never know it, was that slap that forced me to finally choose myself. In trying to destroy me, she had liberated me. I was 64 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I wanted to be, with exactly the people I chose to have around me, living exactly the life I had created for myself. I had never been freer, and I had never been happier. The woman who used to count her worth by how much she could give others had learned to value herself by how much joy she could create for herself. And that, I realized, was the only lesson that had ever really mattered. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.